Alrighty then, I present to you my Omega Crafter. Now, I do gotta legally tell you, I guess, this isn't something completely practical, because it's very expensive. This is mostly for bigger groups, Zergs, or for events. I had this on the pipeline for the last big event I was in, and then we got it destroyed, and I just couldn't rebuild it at a point where it was significant. Like this doesn't keep up in the super late game, I guess, as you would call it. You know, when the server's at its absolute climax, because this thing is a mass production machine. This whole thing is set up to craft a single item, and you get to choose whatever item, and you can swap it around, and just pump it out. It's currently set up just to build an SKS. But how? With a single blueprint being passed around every crafter, and it triggering each time it passes through. Alright, so this box here is empty. This is where all the guns will go. I'm going to click a single button, and it'll turn on the first conveyor, which will send everything to the first crafter where the blueprint is already waiting for it. Keep in mind, it may miss one or two on the rotation just because of the server lag every now and then. So, see, it triggers the first one, sends the blueprints over, it's already triggered here, it's going to send it to the third one, it triggers there too, then it's going to send it over to the fourth one, alongside all the other mats, and it may or may not trigger, but if we do, we're going to get 4 out of 4. There we go. And then it'll send it back all the way to the first one, which should just have been done making the gun. Then it'll send it over to the second one, and this one starts up. Then it sends it over to the third one, which then may or may not start, but there you go. Bam. It's just mass producing guns constantly, just sending them through. So in very short order, you should have a gun box filled. Like, you don't have to have someone awkwardly standing there just crafting the gun. Better yet, whoever's setting this machine up doesn't even need to learn the thing, just has to have the blueprint. And again, you can go up to these machines and swap it out for whatever guns you want. Just put the different ingredients across this menu and have it set up to just drain out the appropriate stuff. Bingo bango. Awesome, isn't that? And of course, you can put, like I said, any gun. I strongly prefer to put the cheaper guns, because by the time you can make the most use of this, it's like in the middle of the event or whatever, and just have this thing just pumping out stuff for you as you're needing them. If your team is like dominating and getting AKs and all that other stuff, you may not need to do that. But this is good for when you're trying to get, you know, a uniform loadout for everybody. Just, you know, send it to all of your soldiers, gift it to other people, do whatever. Alright, now comes the real fun part, explaining how to build this. So these boxes here just represent your loot room. You don't need anything fancy, just connect it into the splitters. So they go into the conveyor belts. So you'll need 2 splitters, you'll need 4 conveyor belts here, you'll need at least 2 workbenches. If you have 2 tier 2s, you can only make tier 2 guns, or items, I guess. If you have a tier 3 and a tier 2, you are stuck just making tier 2 still. So if you want to make the best of the best stuff and spam it, aside from the fact that it's going to cost a lot, you need 2 tier 3 benches. You need 4 crafters, which is one of the other daunting things, because that's a lot of tech trash. You need splitters, you need, well, 6 splitters. You need 4 AND switches, a few branches. You need an OR switch. And then you need 2 more industrial combiners, 5 industrial conveyors, 1 just for, that will do the entire just gun running, but the other ones are very specific. So now comes the wiring. Alright, first things first, this is actually a pretty power-hungry machine. So you need at least 9 power for the industrial conveyors, so that's 9 already. 4 power for each crafter, which would be delivered by, you know, a splitter system. This is not too much of a complicated thing. And the big one is you're going to need AND switches, all of them borrowing 3 power each. So do the math. 9 plus 4 is 13. And then plus 4 times 3, 25. So 25 power. Pretty big. Half a medium battery. Just for this contraption. So I would recommend using this with a memory core, just to switch the power off when you're not using this. But yeah, it's a pretty hefty machine. That said, it's up to you to source the power however you see fit. So like I said, one splitter for the crafters and also a branch with a single power out. Another one of those for the AND switches, 3 to each of them. And the industrial conveyors, just connect them together. Simple as that. Alright, let's start off with the easy wiring. All of these industrial conveyors just have their filter pass to turn them off, so they won't do anything. So this is where it gets tricky. For these other conveyors, their filter pass is a lot more complicated. So their filter passes go into the AND switch. One AND switch for each of these conveyors. Alright? This is very important because whenever they pass something, multiple things need a trigger. So these AND switches, like I said, are borrowing 3 power. So when the filter pass hits, it will release 3 power instead of 1 into one of these splitters. Now each of these splitters are set to do 3 different things. I'll go slow with this explanation. Each of the power outputs of the splitter goes to do a different action. In this case, the first one goes to the appropriate industrial conveyor at the end. The first one with the first one over here. This one will be turned on and then do its action and turn itself off. This one basically just takes out the blueprint and then transfers it over to the next one. The other power out of the splitter turns off the first conveyor belt. Easy peasy, right? Then the next one turns on the subsequent one. So for the first one, it'll turn on the second one. And it repeats for each of these. So from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, and 3 to 4, and then 4 back to 1. And the same thing over here. 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4. There you go. Now all you got to do is just repeat that same step for each one of the conveyors, each of their filter passes. And like earlier I said, it was a big machine to build, but it's more that it's daunting in that how different it is. But anyways, next is the piping. Alright, so the piping is kind of easy. Just pay attention though to when it gets to the crafters. Like I said, loot boxes into a splitter, and then the splitter into another splitter, and then you just kind of take one of the industrial outs into whichever conveyors you want, as long as 1 for 1. Then from there, each of them go into one crafter. The first one to the first one, second to the second one, third to the third, fourth to the fourth. Just sort of keep that pattern in mind. It's very important. The piping is not that pretty. I just want to make sure you guys can see the pipes going into the appropriate crafters. Anyways, now comes the tricky part. And by tricky, I mean it's not that difficult. It's just, you can't screw this part up. So the blueprint out of the first crafter goes into the first industrial conveyor. Again, 1 to 1. However, the output of this industrial conveyor goes into the second one. So from blueprint out here to blueprint input here. So, and then you just follow that same pattern from this one, the blueprint out here, into the second conveyor, but then output goes into the blueprint input onto the next one. So I hope you guys can see the process at play here. So the first industrial conveyor puts in a bunch of stuff into the crafter. The filter pass turns it off, turns on the next one, and turns on the blueprint machine over here. This blueprint machine will then suck out the blueprint from the first crafter and then transfer it to the second one, and it'll turn itself off. Then the second industrial conveyor will then put it into the second crafter and then trigger the second industrial conveyor from over here to turn on, which will then take the blueprint and put it into the third one. So hopefully in that pattern or in that sequence, the crafter triggers to start making whatever you put inside. So it will just keep doing this until you stop it, going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just infinitum. Alright, so unlike other crafters, this one is a bit more manual. You have to make changes if you want to swap out blueprints. Currently, this one's set up for the SKS. Exact materials, you put the exact maximum you need. Preferably, you put the require all filter as well. So if you wanted to change the recipe into a different blueprint, you would go to this machine, swap out the ingredients, and copy it into the other 4. Then on these other ones, these are just set up to take out whatever blueprints you want. Honestly, you can just attach every blueprint here in the menu and it won't really matter. I only have the SKS because I've only been building the SKS with it, but you can just have SKS, AK for whatever. This part can just be set once and forgotten. The last thing, or this one, just takes out the guns and you just put whatever guns you're extracting. So yeah, if you want to switch it out, take out the blueprint, swap it out for something else, MP5 or whatever, and then switch the ingredients and then just start building it. And like I said, it works with any gun. So now it's set up to work for the MP5 and it will just do the exact same process. Absolutely beautiful. I love this kind of contraption. Very cost effective if you're like trying to save on blueprints, because this thing mass produces. It has a very high steep cost to make initially, but the good thing is that you can adapt each individual one to do other things later if you need to, and then swap it into this mode if you need to mass produce a certain thing, so you don't lose the effectiveness of having a single crafter. Like I said, if you really, really need to, you could just temporarily disconnect one and just jam some syringes in there and just craft that for a little while. So yeah, this maintains its individual effectiveness. So yeah, love it. Love it. Look at that. Look at that. Also, I'm adding this just as a fun fact. Not all guns are created equal when it comes to auto crafting. Some guns are really bad for auto crafters, and some are really good. The two best guns and on the same spot as number one is the custom SMG, which I know most of you won't even build, and the MP5. Those are really simple for auto crafters to build just at the get-go. Like, they don't struggle, they won't skip a beat, bada bing. They're really, really good. At the very bottom, though, like I mentioned earlier, is the SAR and the AK. They sometimes jam machines, even without the Omega setup. They're not friendly. And then in the middle is stuff like, Pythons or whatever has low ingredient costs. And I don't mean like, having a total low amount or like in terms of value. It's just as the lower the amount of stuff needs to be transferred, the easier it is with crafters. So keep that in mind.